Good morning. We're going to talk about how to make a presentation file today. And I want to show you a few things. We're actually going to use this really simple assembly. This is part of our robotics, our Vex robotics parts. And it's assembly of a motor and a shaft that is powered by that motor. And then what's called a bearing. And then there's two shaft collars that are on the shaft to kind of help lock it on to whatever you're using it with. And so if you're familiar with these parts, that's you probably understand that already. But I just wanted to point out that there's different parts here. Before I begin, I want to show you. Here's a different assembly, right? I've put together a bunch of parts here. I've got a sensor and some structural parts, and they are all holding together. Again, here's the motor, and we've got gears on these shafts and some bearings over here. But what I've already created is a presentation file with this. And so what I've done in a presentation file and what you'll be doing with your assemblies is you can essentially what's called explode them, where you pull them apart and then you create an animation that shows how they go together. So I've put mine together here, and I'm going to hit play, and you're going to start to see how these basic structural pieces come together, and that piece joins with it, and those two come up together, and some bearings come on, and gears and shafts, the motor, and then the push button. Now I had to select all of that order or that sequence, and I had to play around with it quite a bit. Mostly what I'm using to do that, in fact, pretty much all two things I'm doing is I'm using the tweak components tool, which allows me to move them in a certain direction and a certain distance. And then down here at the bottom, we have what's called a storyboard. And it essentially is different, each part, bearings, gears, they each have their own little animation. And you might notice that they are represented by these little blue blocks, and they are sequenced so that in my case, I had gear 36 and gear shaft, the 3-inch shaft here. These are lined up with each other down in the storyboard, and that means that they're going to move at the same time up here. Just to show you that one more time, here I've got, let me go up to the storyboard. Oh, I'm going backwards. Storyboard down here. Now we're seeing these things happening. And so the storyboard is when the different certain parts are moving, in what direction and how far. So that's where we're headed. And of this other assembly, back to this one, this is just my assembly file. You've made assembly files, and this is what you'll use to create a presentation file. So in terms of steps, you will need to have already made your assembly. And once that assembly is done, you'll save it, of course. But then what I'm going to do here is step one, I'm going to hit new presentation file. And this will open up a window to say, well, what do you want to make a presentation file of? And I want to make it of that motor mount assembly. So I have to select my assembly. I hit open, and it pops that assembly right in here. Notice, again, here's my actual assembly, but here's my presentation file that's going to use that assembly. So I've got those in there. That was my step one was, hit new presentation file. Step two was to select which assembly I want to use. Now, to do some planning here, this is I'm demonstrating with a fairly simple assembly because I only have one motor, one shaft, two shaft collars, and a bearing. So it's only 5 parts. And I'm going to have, I think, one of them just stay in place. And I think I'll have the motor just stay right where it is. What I want to illustrate as I do this presentation is how a shaft goes onto the motor, how the shaft collars come on, and then I'll probably have this this shaft collar come on to the shaft after the shaft is connected to the motor, and then I'll have the bearing come on, and then I'll have this last shaft collar come on. So the order that I'm going to go in is I'm going to start by clicking tweak components, and I can always change this later, but I think what I'll do is I'll start by clicking this bearing, the shaft collar. And when I do it, you'll see that it comes up with these little arrows that allow me to move it in different directions. I don't really want this one to move in that direction or that direction. So I'm going to real quick hit cancel. I'm going to do that again, tweak. I want this to come together the same way that it would in the real world come together with the shaft, which is coming from this direction. So when I click it, I'm going to start by pulling this back this way. And I'm going to tell it to go, I'm going to say, since I have 4 parts that are going to come to the motor, I'm going to tell this thing to go -8 inches. Okay, what that just did is it moved it all the way out here. Okay, for my next part, and I moved it that direction because again, it's going to come right up onto this shaft. For my next part that I'm going to take off, I'm going to take this component. This is the bearing, and I'm going to click Tweak Components. And again, I'm going to pull this thing straight out. Oops, stand by, I messed up there. Tweak Components, and then I'll click the bearing. Then I'm going to grab this arrow, and I'm going to pull it out this way. But instead of going 8 inches, I'm going to go 6 inches. And because I'm going this direction, kind of towards the front here, I'm going -6 inches. Okay, if I did +6 inches, it would go further back this way behind the motor, which sometimes you want. In my case, I don't want that. And actually, I'm going to make it go 7 inches. Okay, so I'll just hit OK. I like the way that's spaced out right now. Again, eventually the animation is going to show how all these things come together. Please notice that I've done these 2 tweaks, and it's created a storyboard down here. The first one is the shaft collar. The next one is the bearing. Right? It lists them here, and it shows them one right after the other. Okay, so my next one is going to be my next shaft collar. So again, I'll open the Tweak Components tool, and I'll click on that shaft collar, and I'm going to pull it out this way, -6 inches. Okay, I did 8 inches, 7 inches, and 6 inches. So I'm kind of equally spacing these out because that'll look neater, more uniform. And then I'll do this one last time to move my shaft. So I'll take this and pull it out this way. And again, I'm going to do -5 this time. Oh, that actually makes it overlap with that. So I'm going to say -4. Yeah, maybe -3.5. So you can kind of play around with this. I like that. That looks good to me. And so these 5 components, they are going to allow me then, interesting. So it's just zoomed around there. I kind of want it, I think I want it from this view where I had it. So what I have here is my storyboard. My shaft collar moved is the first thing I set up. So it set it first on my timeline. And then my bearing on my timeline, then my other shaft collar, and then my shaft. And so if I hit play on this, what you'll notice is that it actually is showing how they pull apart. Good. And if I hit play in reverse, I can hit this, and it's going to show the shaft moving toward the motor, and then the shaft collar onto the shaft, then the bearing, and then the shaft collar. Pretty sweet. Now, all of these things can be tweaked. So if I go to shaft collar and I write, I can open up like my browser under scene 1 and hit tweaks. I have all 3 of these tweaks, and I want to just edit this tweak. It says the options that I have is that it's going to do a full trail, meaning my trail is going to show this line that's moving here. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that, so I think I'll just say OK. And I want to zoom in a little bit here so that when I hit this from this direction and show it, it's going to do this zoom. Now it's moving sort of slow. It looks like the shaft collar goes a little bit faster, and then these things actually move a little bit more quickly. That has to do with the length of your timeline. So this shaft thing, I can go down here and edit this. In fact, I could move these. I could line them all up. Let's try that and play around with this a little bit. Let's try playing that. Notice how they could all move at the same time, which maybe you want some things to move at the same time. What I actually want is my shaft to move first, then my shaft collar, then my bearing, and then my other shaft. So I'm kind of reversing the order of what I've done. I could have these things overlap too. I could grab the edge of this and shorten it to make it only, like right now it's kind of default time is 2.5 seconds. So I could make it go a little bit faster. All right, so I'll move this over. Let's make this all a little bit more quick. Keep my animation short and sweet. Let's say this will be under 10 seconds here. They're all, yeah, so let's try this out. Now when I hit play forward, it's gonna, oops, excuse me. Oh, it's still reversing it. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, let's hit play this way. Oh, okay. I am reversing. I just reversed everything opposite of what I actually want. So I can rearrange this again. Very easy to just drag these things around. That looked weird because it didn't go on in the order that it should. Let's try this again. So here we go. Shaft goes on, then shaft collar, then bearing. Now the thing that I don't have is my motor. So I'm going to add a tweak real quick. I wasn't going to move this, but just to show you everything I've moved so far is going in the same direction. So I'm going to click this guy, and I'm going to have it move upwards. Let's just say, let's say 3 inches. Okay, so you see how this is kind of wonky, and it's going to make this motor. Well, I'm going to put it down at the end here. It's going to make this motor appear as well. So let's try this. Oops, excuse me. Go to the end. So I'll hit play. Now the motor's going to come down from above. And then the shaft comes into it, the shaft collar, the bearing, and the shaft collar again. Okay, so you can play around with timing down here on the storyboard, and you can also play around with the order that you want things to happen. You have the forward play, which will take it apart, and you have a reverse play that will put it together. Okay, and I'm going to hit save on this. Motor mount assembly, I'm going to change this to motor mount presentation. It is an IPN file, so not an IPT file or an IAM file for assemblies or a DW, what is it? IDW file. It's an IPN file. And so anyway, that I'm going to hit save on that. And I need to make sure that it goes in the right folder. So that's going to be in my standby. Sorry. Oh, sorry. It's in my Inventor folder. Inventor. All the way down here with the V's, Vex test bed. There we go. I'll put it right there. Okay, so I've got that saved now. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and make a drawing file. So once you've got your parts all done, I can make a drawing file of my presentation file. So check this out. Okay. It's going to ask me what I want to make a drawing file of. Notice that it's actually showing a preview of this file that I was just working with. It's currently set 1:1. Let's just leave it like that for now. I don't like that scale. Let's make this quite a bit bigger. Let's see. Edit view. Let's make it 2:1. Yep, I like that better. And I think what I'll do real quick is I like to, since this is a presentation file, let's show this in full color. So I'll add the shaded option so it shows all the parts. Okay, so I can see now this is kind of like the instructions that you got with your toys that showed how the pieces come together, and I've got it placed. I couldn't play around. You don't need to do a top, front, and side view of this. It's just one view like this, and I don't really love how the motor's up and out of the way here. I probably should remove that, but for our demonstration's sake, I'm going to leave it like that for now. When you're ready, you're going to go to annotate. No dimensions, but you are going to add what's called a parts list. And the parts list, when I need to select my assembly here, motor mount assembly, is going to essentially be just a list of all the parts that go into this. And so when I click this and bring it in here, I know this is small. I think my sheet is really large. Excuse me just a second. I'm going to edit my sheet. Yeah, I've got a huge sheet. It's 22 by 34. So I'm going to go down to like a size, actually, A. I like that better. Even though that makes the scale way too big, I can change the scale pretty easily over here. So let's make this 1 to 0.75. That's still not going to fit. Excuse me for just a second. One to 0.5. Oh, that's too big. Sorry. There we go, 1 to 2. I'm bringing it much smaller. And this bill of materials, or this parts list up here, oh, I'm messing this up. Sorry. giving me a list of just all of my parts. I'm trying to move this thing. Sorry, I'm needing to grab one of these green dots to move it around. I do have room over here. Oh, I'm sorry. This is making it a little bit harder to move than I thought it would be. That's just making it wider. I'm going to delete that and do it again real quick. Parts list, document is motor mount assembly, and when I hit OK, I can then place it myself. So I'll just do that right over here. I have these big wide columns that don't need to be so big, and so I'll shrink that down a bit. You can just click on the edge of these things and drag your columns to make it fit. You're going to have a lot of parts, and you can play around with your sheet size. Like you saw on here, I did my under edit sheet, I chose size A, which is a standard piece of paper, but you could do size B or C or something like that. I wouldn't go too big because then your parts list will be really tiny. Okay, last thing I'm going to do for this presentation file is I'm going to add balloons. Okay, and what balloons do is it identifies, it takes this list of in your parts list, like item 1 is your Vex motor, 2 is your bearing flat, 3 is the shaft, 4 is the shaft collar, and it actually labels the things from your drawing. So I'm going to do auto balloon, and I'm going to hit OK. Nope, I'm not. Sorry, I'm going to do regular balloon. So I'll click this and drop a balloon. That's going to number at 1. It already knows that that's the motor. When I click on this one and hit enter, that's number 3. It's a shaft. When I click on this one, enter, it's number 4, a shaft collar. Do this one as well. Maybe I'll put it over here. Enter. And then last one I'm going to do is this guy. That is a shaft bearing. So it's using this balloons tool, puts a little numbered label on each of your parts, and those numbers correspond to the item number in your parts list. Okay, so that is a bunch of process here, and I know I did a very simple one with just 5 parts. All of you have much more elaborate things. Remember that you can play around with the spacing and how far you move things. You don't have to do the same way I did it. Like I did an inch difference, and I kind of played around with that in different ways in my presentation. So the thing you'll turn in when you're done, though, is this. You'll turn in your other drawing sheets, but you will also make a drawing sheet of your presentation file. Now, if you already have drawing files that you've started, which a lot of you do, you can create a new sheet and put in your presentation file into that with your parts list and balloons. All right. Use this video as much as you need to review and see the steps, and let me know if you need any help. All right. That's it for now. Have a super duper day.